Let's talk about something that too many people suspect but don't want to believe. It quote said that gut-wrenching question, is he cheating? Now listen, I don't want to add fuel to paranoia, but I also don't want you gaslighting yourself out of your own intuition. So today, I'm not giving you vague signs or wishful thinking. I'm giving you what a man will always do if he's cheating. Not sometimes, not maybe, always. When a man is cheating, one of the first and most consistent changes you'll notice is how he starts to become intensely protective of his privacy. It doesn't happen all at once, and it's rarely obvious at first. But over time, subtle shifts start to appear. Shifts that aren't always easy to explain, but they're even harder to ignore. You may not catch him in the act, but you'll start catching moments that make you question the man standing in front of you. Moments where the behavior just doesn't match the person you thought you knew. Think back to when everything felt normal. His phone would be lying around, unlocked, with messages popping up that you didn't even glance at because there was nothing to worry about. He didn't flinch when you picked it up to check the time. He'd leave his laptop open, maybe even ask you to help him with something on it. Privacy wasn't a performance. It was natural, mutual, and respected. But now something's changed. Suddenly the phone is always in his pocket or turned face down on the table. He starts taking it with him into the bathroom, to the kitchen, even just to grab a glass of water. Notifications are turned off. There are new passwords, ones you're not told about. He tells you it's about security, or that he's just being careful because of work. And maybe you want to believe that. You tell yourself, it's probably nothing. But it doesn't feel like nothing. It feels like hiding. And your instincts are trying to tell you something before your logic can catch up. It's not about invading his privacy. It's not about snooping or spying or trying to control his behavior. It's about recognizing the difference between someone who values privacy and someone who's using it as a shield. Everyone deserves space. But when someone suddenly demands secrecy in ways they never did before, and there's no reasonable explanation for it, it usually means there's something behind the curtain they don't want you to see. Now here's the tricky part. A man who's cheating often becomes a master of excuses. He'll justify his behavior so smoothly that you'll start questioning your own reaction. He'll say things like, "You don't trust me," or "You're being paranoid." He might even make you feel like you're the one with the problem, just because you noticed a shift. But deep down, you already know it's not about the phone. It's about the energy. The energy of someone who is no longer fully open with you. The energy of someone who's guarding a part of his life from you with intention. You'll notice it in his reactions too. If you so much as reach for his phone, he tenses. If you ask a simple question like, "Who were you texting?" he becomes defensive or dismissive. That ease, that transparency you once had, it's gone. And he's not making any effort to bring it back. And here's something that matters even more. It's not just about what he hides, it's about what he stops sharing. Where he used to tell you who he had lunch with, what his co-workers said, or the funny thing that happened on the way home, now it's silence. His stories are shorter. His explanations are vague. He stops volunteering information, and when you ask, it feels like you're prying. That wall he's building, it's not to protect your relationship. It's to protect something he doesn't want you to see. Cheating isn't always physical in the beginning. Often it starts with secrecy, with quiet distance, with the erosion of openness that once made your relationship feel safe. And when you start to feel like there's a door being shut on you over and over again, that's when trust starts to crack. Some people say, if you don't have proof, don't assume the worst. But here's the thing, you don't always need hard evidence to know something's off. Your emotional safety matters just as much as physical fidelity. If someone you love starts making you feel like you're an outsider in your own relationship, if he starts creating a world you no longer feel part of, that's a problem, regardless of whether you've found proof or not. Because a man who's truly committed to you has nothing to hide. He's not perfect, but he's open. He's honest. He answers questions without making you feel ashamed for asking them. He doesn't weaponize the idea of privacy to make you doubt your instincts. He makes you feel safe, not just with your body, but with your heart, your mind, your time, and your peace. So when you notice this shift, when the transparency disappears and the secrecy creeps in, you don't need to accuse or attack. But you do need to pay attention, because love isn't built on perfectly worded texts or perfect behavior. It's built on trust. And the moment that trust starts to erode, it leaves you in a place where you're constantly second-guessing yourself. That's not love. That's walking on eggshells, hoping for scraps of honesty. And let's be clear, you deserve more than that. You deserve to feel like you're in a partnership where you're not being locked out emotionally, where access to truth is not a privilege you have to beg for. And when someone starts creating barriers between you and their everyday life, especially when those barriers never used to be there, that's not just a red flag. That's your intuition telling you it's time to stop ignoring the signs. Because when a man is cheating, he may not confess, he may not get caught, but he will start to behave differently. And nothing reveals infidelity more consistently than a sudden obsession with privacy that didn't exist before. Trust yourself. You're not crazy. You're not overthinking. You're reading the signals he's hoping you'll overlook. And now that you see it, the real question is, what are you going to do with that truth? One of the clearest yet most painful signs that a man may be cheating is when his energy begins to shift. It's not always dramatic or loud. Often it's subtle, so subtle that you question whether it's even happening at first. But something feels different. He's there physically present, maybe sitting right next to you on the couch, but he's not really there. His body is in the room, but his attention, his emotional connection, his spark, it's gone somewhere else. And it doesn't take long for you to feel the weight of that absence. You'll notice that conversations feel more strained. He answers you but without the warmth he used to carry. His tone may be more flat, or his responses more generic. The laughter that used to come easily now feels forced, or worse, missing entirely. He no longer engages with curiosity about your day, your emotions, or your thoughts. And when he does, it feels more like he's checking off a task rather than genuinely caring. That shift is not your imagination, it's a withdrawal, a reallocation of emotional energy that is now being shared with someone else. When a man is cheating, it often requires him to divide his mental and emotional resources between two people. He's juggling lies, keeping track of stories, managing time, and navigating guilt, all while trying to appear normal with you. That balancing act drains him. He doesn't have the same patience, focus, or affection anymore, not because he's suddenly overwhelmed with life, but because he's stretched thin by deception. His emotional bandwidth is no longer fully yours. Even simple interactions begin to change. The way he touches you feels different. The intimacy you once shared becomes mechanical or scarce. He pulls away from moments that used to be filled with closeness, like cuddling on the couch or holding hands in public. If you try to initiate those moments, he might act distracted, tired, or uninterested. And that rejection doesn't just hurt, it confuses you. You begin to wonder what you did wrong. When the truth is, this isn't about you at all. This is about where his heart and attention have started to wander. Another sign is unpredictability in his schedule and behavior. He starts coming home later, blaming work or traffic or sudden errands. He may suddenly have plans that weren't discussed, or he becomes vague about where he's going and who he's with. He used to be open about his daily routine, and now it feels like pulling teeth just to get a straight answer. And when you ask, he acts annoyed or accuses you of being controlling, flipping the script to make you feel like the problem. But here's the thing, when someone truly values you, they want to share their life with you. They want to bring you into their world, not keep you at arm's length. If he's keeping you in the dark, it's because something he's doing can't survive in the light. The emotional shift isn't always negative, either. Sometimes it's just emptiness. The conversations lose depth, the energy in the room feels heavier. The shared jokes, inside references, the ease of being together, it all starts to fade. You can sense that he's mentally somewhere else, even if he's trying to keep up appearances. That emotional disconnect is one of the hardest things to endure because it's not a fight or an argument, it's a slow vanishing act. You're watching the relationship dissolve in silence. And that silence can be deafening. You might start to feel more alone when you're with him than when you're by yourself. That's the paradox of being next to someone who's emotionally unavailable. Their presence becomes a reminder of everything you're no longer getting. It chips away at your confidence. You question your worth. You wonder if you're too much or not enough. You blame yourself for the change, trying to fix something you didn't break. But let's be clear that disconnect isn't your fault. It's not a reflection of your value. It's the result of someone choosing to divide their emotional loyalty and hide it behind a mask. And no matter how hard you try to bridge the gap, if he's giving his energy elsewhere, there will always be a piece of him you can't reach. Sometimes he'll even try to justify the shift by saying things like, "I'm just stressed," or "I've got a lot on my mind." And while those can be valid reasons in a healthy relationship, when they become a pattern without resolution, when the stress is never ending, and the emotional distance keeps growing, it's usually a cover for something deeper. And here's where your intuition comes in. You know the difference between temporary stress and long-term detachment. You can feel when someone is pulling away, even if they never say it out loud. Your heart recognizes the shift before your mind can explain it. And the longer you stay in that space of emotional starvation, the more you start to shrink. But you don't have to stay small, quiet or confused, while waiting for someone to give you back the version of themselves they already gave away. Because real love doesn't make you beg for presents. Real love shows up every day, not perfectly, but consistently. And if you're constantly feeling like you're chasing his attention, trying to recapture a connection that used to feel effortless, then you already know something's wrong. You don't need proof in the form of a text, or a lipstick stain, or a phone log. The proof is in the energy. in the lack of eye contact, in the slow withdrawal of affection, in the way you feel unseen, unheard, and unimportant, even when he's sitting right next to you. So pay attention to the shift. Listen to your instincts. Because when a man is cheating, his energy doesn't lie. He can fake words. He can fake gestures. But he can't fake presence. And the moment he starts giving that presence to someone else, you'll feel it, even if he never admits it. One of the most telling signs that a man is cheating isn't found in grand gestures or sudden disappearances. It's in the small repeated patterns of defensiveness and blame shifting. These behaviors are subtle at first. Maybe he rolls his eyes when you ask an innocent question. Maybe he gets irritated when you bring up something that feels off. But over time, that defensiveness becomes a shield, a way to protect himself not only from getting caught, but from having to take any real responsibility. And the more you bring up your concerns, the more he flips the script until you're the one who feels guilty for even asking. A man who is cheating rarely wants to deal with the emotional consequences of his actions. He doesn't want to confront the pain he's causing or be held accountable for the duplicity he's introduced into the relationship. Instead, he turns the spotlight on you. He begins to accuse you of being insecure, paranoid, or needy. He starts framing your instincts as emotional instability. And when he does that successfully, he no longer has to answer hard questions. He just has to make you doubt yourself. This behavior is not just manipulative, it's strategic. Because as long as you're questioning your own reality, you're not questioning his behavior. Every time he dismisses your concerns or makes you feel like you're overreacting, he creates more space for his secret life to continue. And what's worse, you start internalizing that message. You begin to tell yourself, maybe I am too sensitive, or I need to stop nagging, or I don't want to push him away by asking too many questions. But in reality, what you're doing is perfectly reasonable. You're trying to understand the sudden emotional and behavioral shifts you're seeing. You're trying to protect your peace. And you're trying to preserve the trust that your relationship was supposed to be built on. Over time, the blame game becomes a pattern. You bring up how you've been feeling distant from him, and he responds with, "You're always trying to start a fight, or you're never happy no matter what I do." He stops listening to the content of what you're saying, and focuses only on defending himself. But here's the truth. People who have nothing to hide don't fear questions. They don't get angry when you're honest about your feelings. They lean in, not lash out. A man who becomes aggressively defensive when asked for basic emotional transparency is almost always trying to avoid something he knows will shatter the image he's trying to maintain. Blame shifting also shows up in the way he starts to rewrite the narrative of your relationship. He might say things like, "We haven't been happy for a long time," or "You haven't been the same lately," as if your supposed shortcomings justify his betrayal. He reframes your relationship not as something he's damaging through secrecy, but as something that's already broken because of you. This is a psychological tactic to relieve his guilt. If he can convince himself and you that things were already falling apart, then cheating no longer feels like such a violation. It feels like a response to an existing problem, not the cause of one. And if you try to express how this makes you feel, he might accuse you of being dramatic. He'll say, "It's not that deep," or "You always make everything worse than it is." These kinds of statements are meant to minimize your experience, to make you question your emotional reactions. But the truth is, it asterisks that deep. When trust begins to erode, when connection starts to feel one-sided, and when your instincts are screaming at you that something's wrong, that matters. And any partner who truly respects you would take the time to explore those feelings with empathy, not defensiveness. What's important to understand is that defensiveness isn't the same as healthy boundaries. Everyone has a right to protect their emotional space. But when someone is chronically defensive, when every conversation becomes a battlefield, when every concern is met with deflection, sarcasm, or accusations, that's not protection. That's avoidance. And avoidance is one of the biggest red flags in a relationship where cheating may be occurring. Also notice how the tone of the relationship starts to shift. Instead of being a safe space where you can openly talk about anything, it begins to feel like walking on eggshells. You start rehearsing what you're going to say before you say it. You downplay your concerns in order to keep the peace. You tell yourself, now isn't the right time, or maybe next week when he's in a better mood. And in the meantime, you're swallowing your emotions just to maintain a false sense of harmony. But that harmony is only serving one person. It's serving. Because the less you say, the less he has to lie. The more you stay quiet, the more he gets to maintain control. And the longer this continues, the more exhausted you become. Emotionally drained from trying to make sense of things that don't add up. Tired of carrying the emotional labor of the relationship alone. Tired of the constant second guessing, the subtle gaslighting, and the feeling that no matter how you show up, it's never enough. But you were never the problem. You were just the one asking for honesty in a relationship that was built on it from the start. Cheating doesn't always come with dramatic clues. Sometimes it shows up as confusion, anxiety, and emotional imbalance that starts to feel normal. But it's not normal. A healthy relationship doesn't make you feel crazy for trusting your instincts. It doesn't punish you for asking for clarity, and it certainly doesn't make you the villain for wanting emotional consistency. So pay attention to the patterns, to the way he reacts when you express your truth, to the way he shifts responsibility every time you try to reconnect. Because when a man is cheating, he doesn't just lie with his words, he lies with his reactions, with the walls he puts up, with the shame he tries to place on you instead of owning his own actions. And when that happens, you owe it to yourself to stop shrinking, stop blaming, and start listening to you. When a man is cheating, guilt doesn't always show up as silence or distance. Sometimes it looks like affection. It looks like more flowers, more compliments, more attention than ever before. And in the moment, it can be deeply confusing. You find yourself thinking, maybe I was wrong, he's been so sweet lately. But sweetness that comes out of nowhere, with no emotional consistency behind it, often isn't genuine. It's overcompensation. And that overcompensation isn't about love. It's about covering tracks, masking guilt, and throwing you off the scent. The mistake many people make is assuming that a cheating man will automatically grow cold or distant. And while that does happen in many cases, sometimes the exact opposite occurs. In fact, some of the most elaborate lies are dressed up in grand gestures. A man who's cheating may go out of his way to create the illusion that everything is better than ever. He becomes the man you've always wanted, attentive, thoughtful, generous. But not because he's recommitting to you. He's doing it because deep down, he knows he's betraying you. And rather than confront that guilt, he tries to silence it by smothering you in affection you didn't ask for. This is where it becomes dangerous. Because when someone wrongs you, and then gives you what you've always wanted, it creates a psychological bind. You begin to second guess your own perception. You tell yourself, maybe I'm just being paranoid. Look how well he's treating me. You start to attach this new attention to the idea that things are improving, when in reality, it's just a temporary distraction from the truth. And that confusion keeps you stuck. Think about it. You notice something feels off. Maybe his schedule has changed. Maybe he's harder to reach. Maybe his stories don't quite line up. But just when you start to question things, he shows up with your favorite coffee. He plans a weekend getaway. He texts you more often. He compliments you like he hasn't in months. And for a while that flood of affection makes you feel loved again. It soothes the discomfort. You want to believe that this is a turning point, that he's trying, that maybe you misread everything. But love isn't about intensity, it's about consistency. And when you take a step back, you start to notice that this new version of him isn't sustainable. The compliments feel scripted. The gestures feel timed. There's no real intimacy behind them, just performance. You begin to sense that something deeper is off, even when he's saying all the right things. What's important to understand here is that guilt is a powerful motivator. A man who cheats isn't always proud of what he's doing. He may genuinely feel terrible about betraying you. But instead of owning that pain and coming clean, he chooses to manage it in a way that allows him to keep both lives going. He gives you just enough love to keep you close, while continuing to act in ways that violate the foundation of your relationship. That affection. It's not about you. It's about his conscience. You'll also notice that his affection doesn't invite closeness. It just buys time. When you try to talk about the relationship, when you bring up concerns or feelings, he might deflect, change the subject, or say something like, "I just took you out to dinner. Why are you starting a fight now?" He wants to do just enough to keep you calm, but not enough to actually rebuild trust or create emotional intimacy. And that's the difference between love and guilt. Love leans in, guilt shuts you down, and then hands you a gift. Another subtle sign is how this overcompensation makes you feel afterward. In the moment, it might be exciting. But afterward, you feel empty, unsettled. Like you just experienced something sweet that somehow left a bitter taste. That's your intuition at work. Because your body and mind are picking up on the mismatch between action and intention. Deep down, you know that something real can't be bought with sudden kindness. You don't want flowers, you want truth. You don't want compliments, you want to feel safe. Overcompensation can also come in the form of exaggerated attentiveness. He starts asking questions about your day more often, texting you good morning when he never used to, or showing interest in things he's never cared about before. Again, on the surface, it seems like growth, but the key is whether that attentiveness feels connected. Is he listening, or is he checking off boxes? Is he present, or is he performing? One of the cruelest parts of this behavior is how it conditions you to associate love with confusion. You start to believe that love looks like highs and lows, like chaos followed by charm. That unpredictability becomes the new normal, and it erodes your sense of peace. You may even feel guilty for questioning him when he's doing so much. But it's not your job to ignore patterns just because someone wrapped them in a pretty bow. True affection doesn't come out of nowhere. It doesn't spike when someone has something to hide. It builds gradually, it grounds you, and it makes you feel secure. If someone suddenly becomes your dream partner overnight, especially right when you started feeling suspicious, don't silence that inner voice. Ask yourself why now? Why the change? What is he trying to prove? And more importantly, what is he trying to cover? Because when a man is cheating, one of the most reliable signs is not just what he hides, but how hard he works to make sure you never think to look. Overcompensation is a smokescreen. It's designed to keep you emotionally off balance just long enough for him to maintain control. But you're smarter than that. You don't need to wait for the truth to scream at you when your intuition is already whispering. Pay attention not just to what he gives you, but why he's giving it. And if that love doesn't feel peaceful, honest and consistent, it probably isn't.